Oh, yeah. Hello to everyone. And once again, I'm here to bother you. Okay, so just few words what's happening at here. Not very much, really, not very much. Weather is really now, I don't know what's the right word to use, deteriorating in terms of the raining. Uh, yeah, so and also quite windy, raining and windy. And in terms of the COVID-19, yeah, it is still going in India, but there's no serious issue at monastery here and also surrounding the monastery. So that is just briefly to say, to inform you what's happening in my samsaric life, and I'm fine and I'm well, and sounding my samsaric life. Okay, so better to read the text, and so the last week. The reading started from verse 16, and we finish verse 17, 16 and 17. And from verse 16, as I mentioned the last week, explanation on these six perfections, such as generosities, ethics, and so forth. So I will not repeat their overall function and so forth, which I did last time. And people who are interested to read in more detail on six perfection, particularly the first four perfections, from the generosity to joyous effort, the individually. Then in the Tsongkhapa's, here, great treatise, on the stages of the path to enlightenment. In the second, what you call the volume, and starting from from chapter 9, page 113, really very, very useful and detailed explanation. Although that we can, for example, to practice the third perfection, which is patience, which we can read in the Shantideva's, the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. It has an entire chapter which really explains all the detail. But it is in a form of verse, written in a form of verse, and also it has that kind of flow in the sense, having dialogue with the with the anger, and very nice. But here, other ways, for example, to study the second perfection, the perfection of ethics. There are particular texts like Asangas, Bodhisattva Bhumi, Asanga's text, which has the 3 or 4 chapters. One chapter is called Chunjusambe. So the Bodhisattva's ethics chapter. But that's very detailed, and there is a nice commentary written by Tsongkhapa. But these are the individual, dealing with the individual perfections, but not many texts to see all the first 4 perfections are explained, in detail, in one text. And this Tsongkhapa is in the second volume, which I've just shown you. Had a really nice, what you call in terms of the size, not extremely detailed, but have very good explanation. So I would encourage you to read, the people who are interested want to understand further on these, particularly first 4 perfections. Then you may think, why the last 2? Last 2 are the concentration and the wisdom. Concentration and the wisdom. The concentration and wisdom are explained quite often. For example, concentration in the sense cultivation of shamatha is taught very often in many different forms. Although, Tsongkhapa in the 3rd volume, entire 3rd volume on this in this teaching is on the 5th and 6th perfections. So that's one thing which maybe just to remind to you people who are interested in that. Now, the last time when we read the verse 16 and 17, relation to the how to practice the 6th perfection, we talk about the perfection itself, the perfection of generosity, and I just want to read briefly, from the Tsongkhapa's text, and this is again this same text which I just showed you, page 100, the 14, and in the section of generosity, what is generosity? And then there is a nice quotation which I've just mentioned, the text by Sangha, Bodhisattva Bhumi, or here translated Bodhisattva levels. There's a nice quotation. And after the quotation, then Tsongkhapa says this: hence, it is the virtue of a generous attitude and the physical and verbal actions which are motivated by this, and bringing the perfection of generosity to completion is not contingent on removing beings' poverty by giving gifts to others. In other words, to say my practicing charity or my practicing generosity is completed because poverty is completely gone. Completely, there are no people who are lacking their needs. Not in that sense. It is the individual's mental. Then here he goes like this. Okay. Okay. So I will read this, and then you don't need any. Otherwise, since there still remain many destitute living beings, all the earlier conquerors, in other words, Buddhas, would not have attained perfect generosity. Therefore, the physical and verbal aspects of generosity are not the main thing. The main thing is the mental aspect. And this is because you perfect generosity after you destroy your stingy clinging to all uh, uh, clinging to all that you earn, your body, resources, and roots of virtue, and you completely condition your mind to giving them away to living beings from the depths of your heart. And not only that, but also to give to others the effect of this giving as well. So that is something which is important. In other words, saying our our mental strength, our mental state is completely free from, when to train our mental state to completely free from that. Here the term is used, stingy. In other words, the miserliness. And in other words, our mental state should be free from attachment to, or not just what we are given, but also result of our practice of giving. So that is what here clearly, nicely mentioned, and it is quite important to understand that. And then the perfection of generosity is can be practiced, of course, in many different ways. But the commonly explained in here in the Buddhist text is saying gift of the gift of the teachings, the gift of fearlessness, and material gifts. So, in other words, what to be shared to the others, what to be given to the others, like advice, suggestions, teachings, and all those things which and also the second one is fearlessness. Fearlessness in the sense protecting other living beings from the dangers of their lives, dangers of their possessions, dangers of their status, protecting them from the dangers. Fearlessness in the sense you don't have any fear to protect others from the dangers, and that is the second. And the third is material gifts. Of course, the people, living beings who are lacking their basic needs, their material needs, giving, supporting that. So those are something which I haven't touched last reading. And so today our reading, we will start from verse 18. Verse 18. So the verse 18 is explaining the second perfection of what you call the ethics, perfection of ethics. But I didn't bring my my English what you call the text. I need to go. Sorry. I will be back. Okay. So now the verse 18, on The second perfection of ethics. And in here, may I never transgress the discipline of morality and free myself from pride, since by having pride in the appearance of morality and purity, one is without morality. I wish to accomplish the perfection of morality. So that is the verse 18 in English. Now in Tibetan, Timji Tsudim Gun Mejing, Tsudim number Tagdang Den. Tsudim number Tagdang Den. Lomsem Mebe Tsudim Ki, Tsudim Paro Chinzo Sho. So that is the in Tibetan. Timji Tsudim Gun Mejing. Tim. Tim literally it has a meaning of law, or that is the meaning in Tibetan. Tim, Timki, Tsutim Mejing, Tsutim ethics. So there are two. The first one is say Timki, Tsutim Mejing, Meba. The Gun is four, flower four, or mistakes, and the Gun Meba without four. That is what here, and the meaning here is this. Yang tak bolang batang malang be timji sudim timji malang be timji. So the ethics that we practice, ethics that we need to practice, there are generally two kinds, and two kinds in the sense what we can say, whether we have taken any particular precepts, whether we make any particular particular, whether we have taken any particular precepts or not. As a human being, there are certain things that we shouldn't do. That is, the harming others. So harming others, the others' lives, others' possessions, the others' status, that avoiding that, refraining from that is, some kind of natural, our natural in the sense, whether we have taken any precepts or not, it is our responsibility, refraining from harming to others. And that is something, which out of those in Tibetan, using here twice the timki, tsutim. So in other words, here the commentator using yang thakwa langba ta malangbe timki tsutim. So yang thakwa langba, that means you voluntarily take the precepts not to do certain things by your own choice. Like, for example, refraining from using intoxicants, alcohol, such as alcohol, or other things. That is, voluntarily and on your own choice, you take that precept and you voluntarily do that. take that vow. And that is, the one thing. The other thing is whether you have taken a vow or not in front of somebody, in front of something, the harming others' lives, others' possessions, that is something, our natural responsible. Natural in the sense, as a human beings, we should refrain from doing. So there are two things, and that's what here, Lambada. So in the both area, there's no flaw. There's no mistake. No mistaken is made, or no. You are able to refrain from the both, areas, refraining from harming to others, and refraining from the activities that you take precepts voluntarily. So that is what meaning of that. Tsurim number then. So when you are able to do that, when you are very intentionally, very deliberately able to refrain, yourself, your body, speech, and mind, from harming to others, also from what you call the engaging the precepts that you have taken, then that is the second line. Sutim number tagdan. Your ethics, your morality is pure, or without any stain. That's the sutim number tapa demba. Lomsim mebe sutim ki. The third line. Lomsim has a meaning of what you call it has, in generally, Lomsim has a meaning that pride. You have this negative pride. You have that arrogance saying, then when you are able to keep your ethics, when you are able to refrain from all those precepts, you are able to refrain from the activities that you have taken precepts. Then you have this some kind. If you have some kind of the arrogant or the pride, the negative pride, it has that kind of meaning. But here the lomsim has a particular meaning. Lomsim here lomsim refers to, yes, pride, negative pride, but it is mainly referring to grasping, self-grasping, true grasping. Your those three things, yourself as a what you call the practitioner, or as a practicing ethics, and what the ethics itself that you have practiced, and the actions, the korsum number tago tsurim korsum denshin lomba meba. So those yourself, the actions, and also the mental state, which is the ethics itself. Those three, your mind is free from true grasping from those three, and this is the meaning of lomsim, and here translated pride, saying that since by having pride, and also so the pride is, I think in general it is fine, it is how it is, but here mainly not particularly referring to pride in this sense. In this sense, according to the commentator, the Lom Sem in Tibetan is grasping, self-grasping, or true grasping. True grasping on these three things: yourself, your ethics, and the actions of refraining from those wrongdoings. And that's what here then said, Lomse mebe tsudim ki tsudim paro chinzo sho. May the perfection of ethics be completed. And that's what this verse 18. Lomse mebe tsudim paro chinzo sho. So now the first one, although earlier I talked about, as a human beings, whether we have taken precepts or not, whether we are following, any particular spiritual path or not, we all have responsibility to refrain from harming others, and that is also ethics. It is called, if we do not, refrain from harming to others, then in Tibetan it is called Rangshinki Kanamatoa. Rangshinki Kanamatoa. Rangshin literally means naturally. Kanamatoa, it means transgression or downfall. That is what, and therefore, very often that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, explains, the sort of what you call the ethics without religious element, and that's what here it is involved in, ethics without religious, connotation, and that's what he is talking about under that umbrella, which is really, useful to. Without that as a base, if we are unable to refrain ourselves, our body, speech, and mind from that kind of, that levels of wrongdoing, then it is very difficult us to move to the second level, which is in Tibetan, it is called Jebe Kanamatoa. Jebe Kanamatoa. Jeba literally it means, it is sort of giving the order, Jeba. Order by, in this sense, by the Buddha. Buddha gave to his, his followers, particularly in this case, those ordained, the sanghas, ordained monks and nuns. If you live in that kind of particular lifestyle, then these are the, ethics. These are the rules. These are the, rules you have to obey. You have to live your life in that particular manner, in that particular, rules. And that is called Jebe, if ordained monks and nuns, also lay people, when lay people take the lay precepts, the 8 or 5 lay precepts, and that is also in that category. Then, if you are unable to, refrain, or if you are unable to keep those, then it is called in Tibetan Jebe Kanamatoa. Jebe Kanamatoa, that literally means, because of you taking the precepts and what you didn't follow, the precept is the downfall or the transgression due to the so there are those two things, which is something important. And the first one, Rangshingi Kanamato, naturally downfall or transgression, that is something base or the foundation, and that is again the practice, practice and on the basis of compassion, cultivate, it will come, to restraining from harming others will occur, will sort of come with us in our daily life when we cultivate compassion. That compassion is the base. So then you can look at that concept. So then the Rangshingi Kanamato, that naturally becoming downfall, and we restrain from that. And when we restrain from that levels of downfall, then if we want to take more further, then comes to precepts, taking precepts. So taking precepts, lay precepts, what you call the monastic precepts, and that is called Bhakti Moksha precepts, those two. Then, the Bodhisattva precepts. Then Vajrayana precepts. So the people who practice the Vajrayana path, then it has these different stages or these different levels of ethics, to be practiced, So that's one thing which is useful to remember. And then in the ethics, in morality, again there are three kinds of morality, three kinds or three types that which I will briefly read in the. So I will read again the same text by Tsongkhapa. And this is on page 143, chapter 11. What ethical discipline is? The ethical discipline is an attitude of abstention that turns your mind away from harming others and from the sources of such harm. So that is harming others and the sources of harm, the sources of such harm. That those two are really important. Sawada Domba in Tibetan. It's not coming. So it says, harming others and from the sources of such harm. So both are mentioned. The action itself, the physical, verbal, or mental, but also the sources of that harmful action. So refraining. Very often when we talk about the ahimsa, the what you call the non-violence. Quite often we just look at the surface, surface in the sense not physically, verbally harming others. But here need to look at more in the further step, sources of harmful action itself. And that's what here. And also similar comments are made in here. Therefore, you bring about the perfection of ethical discipline by progressively increasing your habituation to this attitude until you reach completion. And then, however, it is not the case that you bring perfection of ethical discipline to completion in the external world by establishing beings in a state of free of all harm. And that's all similar comments is made in the previous, in the generosity. Ethic is practicing ethic is not you sort of make there's no harmful activities outside there. People not harming to each other. Not in that. It is your mental state, your mind to free from harmful actions and also sources of harmful actions. And that's what here. And then, what you call again, it has three kinds of, like the generosity, there are three sort of, here the translated division. So it says, the ethical discipline of restraint, ethical discipline of gathering virtue, and the ethical discipline of acting for the welfare of living beings. So generally, when we talk about ethics, as also in the definition or the explanation of what is ethic, is mainly looking at the first one, that is ethical discipline of restraint. That it is in the same book on page 148. So normally when we talk about ethics, we are just mainly looking at that first area, that is restraining our body, speech, and mind from the harmful actions and the sources of harmful actions. We're looking at just that. But the second and third, particularly for the Bodhisattva's practitioner, third one is very important part of the ethical practice. Third is the ethical discipline of acting for the welfare of living beings. Semjen Tunjit Tsudim in Tibetan. Semjen Tunjit Tsudim. So for example, when somebody has cultivated bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind, somebody has cultivated that mind. But then over the certain situations when he or she faces, and if he or she feels from his or her heart, this is too hard, working for the living beings, too hard. That stage, there is a risk he or she may lose, his or her, the bodhicitta. And that is here, this third is very crucial. Of course, all the three, the first one is the base in this case, ethical discipline of restraining from the harmful. Second one is really gathering, gathering, or in other words, making oneself, one's own mind, body, speech, and mind have the virtues, richness of virtue. That is the second discipline, which is important. So those are the things. So I want to read one verse. Otherwise, so then the next verse is verse 19. That is the third perfection of patience. Perfection of patience. And here in English, patience must be as steady as earth or water, not changeable like the wind. Knowing that both patience and anger do not exist, I wish to accomplish the perfection of patience. Okay, in Tibetan, Sam Yang Chuam Me Lungi Kamtar Mineshin Sebam Toa Machibe Sebe Paro Chin Dzogcho. So I don't know why they put it this one. Not changeable like the wind. Don't know why they put it that here. Anyway, so here it is saying, there are two different interpretation, but one, the commentator, the interpretation is this, the individual, the practitioner of patience, or tolerance, should be like those elements, the elements of earth, water, fire, wind. Also it, to a certain extent, talk about the space. They whatever you do, whatever you act, they don't have any sort of differences. These elements, earth, water, fire, so on and so forth. Whatever you do, they, water remains water, earth remains earth, fire remains fire, winds remains winds. They will not change according to how you act. So your patience should be like that. Whatever the other beings, do to you, you should not lose your patience. You should not lose your tolerance. Like those like those great elements. And that is the connotation. And there's one word which saying meneshin, lungi kande meneshin, menepa. Here it is translated, they're all, what you call absence of intrinsic. They are not abide. They are not abide in intrinsic nature. They are absence of intrinsic nature, or they are not abide in intrinsic nature. Though whatever you do, these elements remains as an element. And your perfection, your tolerance, perfection of tolerance should be perfected in that manner, without any sort of retaliation, in that manner. So that is what here in this verse. Sam yang na, sam means sa is earth, that's that kind of choice, or yang na chu is the water, or me, the fire, lungi kam lung, can be element. Also, this commentator, it can be refers to the space. So sometimes, the 5 elements in the ancient Indian, the culture count as 5 elements. When the elements are counted in a 5, have 5 elements, then space is counted. Space is counted. And in Mineshing, they're all absence of intrinsic, or they not abide in intrinsic nature. When it comes to Mineshing. Sabam toa machipa. Sabam. So you really, what you call the hold your patience. You should not. You should not. Show your what you call the toa, hatred. Anger, machipa. The not having, not shown, not express that your hatred or anger. Through that severe parochin, may I be perfected the practice of patience. And that is what here. And just want to read, the English from this text. What is patience? Patience is, disregarding harm done to you, accepting suffering arising in your mind stream, and being certain about the teachings and firmly maintaining belief in them. So that is what here talk about. Which here already talk about, the practicing patience have these three sort of elements. Three elements. The first one is saying disregarding harm done to you. So the harm that caused to you, the harm itself, the people who cause that harm, if you look at the Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva of Life, there are lots of dialogues to analyze the nature of the harm, how that harm is inflicted upon you by certain person, and so on and so forth. And through that understanding, then initially reducing that irritation, agitation, and so on and so forth. For example, there is a nice few verses Shantideva had, like a dialogue. So if you are really, really anger, say this, create a scenario, somebody, hit you by a stick, and that is very painful. So you are very angry. So then a scenario is created. Why you are angry towards that person? Actual pain is caused by the stick that hits your body or whatever. Then if you say, oh yeah, because that person holds stick and he or she intentionally, do that. Then again, going back to the argument, does he or she really has that kind of, the power to control his or her mind? And then saying he or she acted under affliction. That can be anger, that can be jealousy, that can be attachment. He or she doesn't have that much choice because of that affliction is extremely powerful. He was pushed to act that. So through that kind of analysis, then reducing agitation, irritation, anger, and that is what here, disregarding the harm done to you. So now this time is really, we'll come back that next time. Yeah. Okay. Turn your entire prayers. Wama koje shen so hadang hami jeme shabye pemo la de pongba Rama yum la cha ze omo je ma pama drama la cha ze drama nyu ma pa mo jene ke che la jige sunggun che je she de ka sang che wan cha ze dongge da wa kun do kang wa jene ze be she Kama tongda tsobe namanje rapo chewe. Chanze sengwe chune peme chane nabara jimba zundu kato shewa sewa samden chu chanze tejin shewe zu do paye nabara jawa malu paro jimba to be dewe sege shindo chanze do da rang ye ke do ta cho da jigden dombo shadi ne de beba meba go chanze jajin mela tsang da long la na so 정보 랑 제사 남만다 니준 소디 장제 제제 차다 배 바로 초고라 예공 윤장 샤데 매버 초고하신 장제 도리 지방체 되게 바오 넘버 중 주지 전에 전에 된제 더 탐제 장제 군조 순전 차제 세면 도가 마리 초기 콜로지 랑지 외지 장제라도 가와지 우진 외지 청와 제바라 제도다라 외다지 장제 사시 동에서 탐제 고바는 그녀와 이게 홍게 통과 탐제 장제 다외 동보 젠바 탐제 Rebe Trene Bang, Operation Chanze Gebe Tama, Barre, Chenwe, Yeja Yungumukune, Koroge, Jay, Punyan, Chanze Sashi Mala Change, Kiki, Meeting, Tony Jenze, the bottom bonum, Chanze Dema, Gemashe, Yange, So da yang da den de ba chen bo jong ba ni chan ze ku ne ko ro ka da ye ne na ba ye ge je be nga ne ko be de ba hong le chan ze tu re shan ne ta be hong ge na be sa be re ra men da ra ta be de ge sun chan ze ha yi chue na be de ta ta je chan 다라니 주 폐게 되나 말을 하면서 장제 화에 손에 하다면 은혜 고창가와 제 저다 너는 장제 니마다와 제 진이过来 하라니 주 또다라 신도 타고네 장제 진이 손남 그学토다양당데 되다 정바도레 랍종이 자외하게 되반데 창제와니 쇼자 창조 생조는 뭐지 마제 바노메제 제바 냠바 메바야 공내 공도 배와쇼 강레라 고친가 벤다데와 마네 용 제레성와 대쟁자고 샤베 시대 파도 엔조로제 Oh yeah. Thank you very much. It is a little bit longer than some of the previous sessions. I was very much into reading Tsongkhapa's text. Anyway, yeah, thank you and see you next time.